Hi, this is Jason Radford, and today I'm going to talk to you about recruiting subjects online. This is a part of our summer workshop series teaching you how to do online experiments with subjects using volunteer science and just in general. In the next 2 weeks, we'll have a workshop on creating cognitive tasks with JS Psych. Then we'll have a training on creating multi-person studies using volunteer science. And lastly, we're going to have a workshop on building your own subject pool, allowing you to tap into the same subjects over and over again for multiple studies. If you're interested in any of these, you can register at volunteerscience.com/events. On with the show. So today, I'm going to talk about, first, why are we recruiting subjects online? What are the advantages and disadvantages? Some basics of recruiting subjects. And then I'm going to talk about specific strategies, partnerships, crowdsourcing, social media, subject pools, online ads. I'm going to go through each one of these and talk about how you create a strategy for each one of them. And lastly, I'm going to show you a decision tree, how you can think about what kinds of strategies work given your budget, the number of subjects that you need, and the size of the audience you're trying to reach. So let's get started. All right, so why recruit subjects online? And the internet has become more and more pervasive across the globe, which means that you can reach most anyone anywhere in the world for your study. This means you have more diverse samples and bigger samples. You're no longer constrained to recruiting subjects on campus or in your local neighborhood. You can recruit anyone. This also means that you can recruit many more people. You can run 10,000 people overnight on a survey online, which is something that you could never imagine doing in a physical lab. It's also more convenient for participants and for researchers. People don't have to come into your lab to fill out your survey. They don't have to worry about having somebody show up at the lab or not show up at the lab, and having to reschedule. So it's just more convenient. Now, there are downsides too. So there's a lack of sample control. You don't know who's on the other side of the screen and whether they're going to behave well or they maybe have screaming children going on in the background and just messing up their concentration. You don't know. There's protocol challenges. So somebody may not be proficient in the language that you're teaching in or language that you're running your study in, and it may be difficult to assess that. People may not understand what you're asking them to do, so they may not understand the instructions. Or if you're building some unique interface, they may not understand what buttons they need to press to submit their responses or to make a choice. So there could be some task comprehension issues as well. Lastly, there can be some data quality issues. So people can be inattentive. They can be rushing through the study because they're getting paid, or because suddenly they're running out of time and they don't have the time that they thought they had. And lastly, they can be bots. People create bots to participate in surveys and then get that $5 to the researcher is paying. So when you do online studies, there are challenges. You want to make sure that you are putting in questions and checks in place to make sure that people understand what you're asking them to do, that they in fact fit your sampling frame, that they are the age and gender or location that you're interested in recruiting from, and that they're giving you quality data. So let's talk about what it means to recruit subjects. Now, generally, what we've done with this is we've created a study recruitment flyer and we put it on a community board, whether it's in a psych department or the local community center, and we post our flyer. And the modern online world has a similar sort of feel. We can post our flyer on Twitter or Facebook. We put a quick call for participants for a study and post it as a tweet or post it as a post on Facebook. The whole goal of this particular presentation today is to get you to think about, rather than creating a flyer and just posting it online, think about the strategy. I want you to learn how to create a recruitment strategy for your particular study. So let's talk about what that actually involves. So there are 3 elements to a strategy: the audience, the channels, and the message. And the audience is 2 parts. Who qualifies? What are the people that you're looking for? Specific ages, specific genders, races, are they couples, are they singles? Uh, but beyond who qualifies, you want to know who's actually going to be interested. Couples who just moved in together, people who are 18 to 24 but who would like video games. Who's actually going to see your ad and go, whoa, I should be doing that right now. Or let me go ahead and bookmark this. I'll do it tonight. Who's going to be really interested in it? Second, the channels. Where can you find them? What kind of public spaces online? What kind of moderated online groups or organizations are they socializing around? Think about where they are. And lastly, the message. How do you motivate them to participate? We've identified their interests already. They like video games, and so you want to communicate that you have a video game, or that what you have has points involved, or has a narrative. Why do people who like video games going to like your study? Think about that and then articulate it in the message. What do they get out of it? So the major contribution today is this strategy worksheet. For each of the strategies that I'm going to talk about, we're going to fill out this worksheet with questions that you need to answer every time that you do a study as a way for you to think through, who are the people who are interested in my study? Where can I find them? And why would they participate? What do I need to say to get them on board? Take a screenshot of this, fill it out yourself, or just write it down yourself. It's just 3 questions. Lastly, once you do that, once you have your strategy, you'll want to have your message and material together. And these are the elements that we've put together for volunteer science. This is an example volunteer science study. Is a demonstration that we've developed based on qualitative interviews with our participants. So first, the image is really essential. What the image does is it draws people's attention in, and it immediately gets them excited. It's a very emotional part of the message. Here, this is a template that we use for our games. So immediately we're communicating this is a game, and the silhouetted oil derrick says it's a game about drilling for oil, which is exactly what this is about. The text below really gets into the why. What are you doing? Why is it important? And how is it going to solve real-world problems? And lastly, who's eligible? Always make sure you're clear about who is eligible to participate. All right, I start with partnerships because 80% of the time when somebody asks me for advice on how to recruit subjects, the answer is partnerships. Now, the reason for this is that partnerships are really good for people who are looking for a very specific kind of person. So when you have a narrow audience and you have no money to reach them with, partnerships are the best way to go. The reason for this is that partner organizations, businesses, professional associations, online groups, they've already done the work of finding that audience for you. They have a professional association of accountants, or there's a professional association of lawyers. And all you need to do is figure out how to get your study in front of that professional association, that huge group of lawyers, to recruit. You can also think of businesses, people who are selling products to these types of people, or online groups, Facebook groups, subreddits, different kinds of online organizations that you can partner with. And how does it work? So the idea here is, what do you want to do with the partner to actually get people to participate? So you can send emails to their members. The easiest thing to do is get a partner to send emails to their members. The downside is that people reach out to a partner organization and says, hey, can you help me out and send an email to your members? And they say, nope, that doesn't sound interesting. That's a bunch of spam. Get out of here. Email to members is still the best thing to do, but what you want to do, what you're trying to do, is establish the relationship. You want to get them to understand why your study is important, what the partner is going to get out of it, and what the participants are going to get out of it. You want them to trust you, and you want them to understand the value that you can give. And you actually want to take the time and think, what is the value for the partner? What are they going to get out of it? And if there's nothing in the study that's particularly interesting, because most scientific research is pretty boring, what you can do is you can give them a lecture about the study that you're doing, the science behind it, or just something that is interesting that you have the expertise to cover. Be creative here. But the idea here is don't just ask the partner for help. Make sure that you give them something in return and develop that relationship. Pros and cons, of course, finding that narrow audience is the biggest pro here. There's also a particularly large sample size. There's some really large organizations out there. And again, if you could tap into the American Bar Association and get an email sent to all of the members, that's a lot of lawyers. The other side of this too is that these people are typically highly engaged. There's a reason that they join the organization. And so when you get the American Bar Association to send an email about a study related to law, those people are going to be really interested in what the ABA is telling them is worth their time. The downside is that it requires a lot of work and a lot of time to get in the door. You have to go in with the message that tells the partner why it's important to them, and you have to spend a lot of time talking to the right people to make sure that you get buy-in from them. So it requires a lot of time and work to get in. The other side is that it can be potentially limited in the sample size. Not all organizations are big, and not all organizations are willing to give you access to everybody. Maybe they will let you show up at their next meeting in Boston, and maybe the Boston meeting is relatively small. What you would want to do is sometimes string together a bunch of different small partnerships. All right, so back to the strategy guide. If you think partnership's right for you, here are the questions that you should answer to figure out what your plan is going to be. So think about what organizations or clubs your people belong to. These could be online or offline. The idea is that your study is online, and you could send them an email, or you can have them get flyers in person, but then participate online. Where do they shop or make big purchases? The idea here is that you can show up to where they're physically shopping and have them participate on a tablet. Or, especially with small businesses, collaborating with them to be a part of their regular newsletter to their customers. That can be a good strategy. Lastly, again, native online groups and communities that these people are a part of. Where do they hang out online? We'll talk about social media a little bit later. When we think about these online groups and communities, we're thinking about partner organizations. We're thinking about moderated groups, moderated communities, thinking about blogs. Subreddits typically are highly moderated. So what you would want to do is partner with blog authors, community moderators. Where can you find the partner? So the question is, how do you get access into the organization, into the online community? So the first question is, do you know anybody at the organization? And do you know any current members? Typically, when you're doing research on a narrow sample, it's probably because you have an experience with that particular sample. Either you're a member of that sample, or you know somebody who fits that description. So think about the people that you know who fit the description of a potential member of the organization. Who actually knows somebody there who can make connections and open doors. The best way to enter a partner is through these personal introductions. Cold calling sucks. It's low. It's hard to do, and it's a very low chance of getting somebody to pick up the phone. But sometimes you have to do what you have to do. The other thing is you want to figure out who the decision maker is. Who do you need to get the yes from to actually make it happen? And the reason why you want to figure that out is you want to know who are you trying to get in front of, because the person who you need to email first is not necessarily the person who's going to make the decision. But you also need to know that when you're there in the room with them, when you send them an email, that you send them the right email, that it's telling them why it's important to their organization, what you're going to give back to them, and what you need. Specifically asking, is it okay if we send an email to your members? Just as a side note, if you are trying to work with an organization that has less than 10 members, 10 sort of formal members, like online groups, less than 10 moderators, we'd want to try to reach out to the director, CEO, owner, founder. A small organization, the buck stops at the top, and you're going to have to get that's the decision maker. Larger organizations, whether they're nonprofits, businesses, what have you, will very often have a person or part of the organization dedicated to external affairs. So if it's businesses, it could be business development as the office that you need to talk to. Big nonprofits, there's often external affairs or community engagement offices or community engagement officers. And lastly, sometimes there's community development officers or volunteer managers, people who are working directly with people outside the organization. So once you've figured out the organization and who you need to talk to, you got to figure out your pitch. Why should the partner help you? What can you give the partner organization in return, the organization itself? And what's the benefit for the members? How's it good for the American Bar Association? How's it good for lawyers? What are they going to get out of it? Make sure you have that ready to go. All right, next one, crowdsourcing. Now, this is what we do at Volunteer Science. Crowdsourcing involves studies where anybody in the world can participate, and you can provide usable data. This is a project for anyone, anywhere. So what makes crowdsourcing work? First, the experience has to be intrinsically valuable. And people have to want to do it because they get something out of it. Not because they're getting paid, not because it's busy work, but because they feel like it's doing something for them or for the world. There has to be a high value for repeat participation. People have to be able to not only do one thing, but do 10, 20, 30 things at a time. The idea here is that you want people to provide as much work in the crowd as possible. Related to this is that there has to be some work. There has to be a sense that people are accomplishing something, that people are adding to their work. They're not spinning their tires. Every time they do some kind of work for your study, that they're adding to the pile of accomplished science. And the last two are about community building and getting a sense that there are others who are working with them. So participants can see their results, which means that they get feedback on how well they did. They know where they rank. They know how much they've contributed versus others, and they can see their progress. They go from being a novice to an expert. And as part of this, they can be a part of an online community of people talking about, commiserating about, sharing insights about the study. So pros and cons for crowdsourcing. So any study can be a crowdsourced study. You just have to think about how do you design the logistics of your study to take advantage of these things. But once you do, you can get high commitment from participants. People really get behind your study. And you can get lots of data over a long period of time with lots of people if you design your study to leverage crowdsourcing well. The problem is that it's a lot of cost up front. You've got to really think through, what are people going to get out of this? How are people going to recruit their friends? There's just a lot to think about up front. It takes a long time to develop. You can build the coolest thing in the world, and nobody's going to show up because the world's full of cool things. Just think about all of the other things that people are doing with their time already. So even if you build a cool thing, you've got to do the work of actually getting people to show up, understanding what it is, actualizing that value, and like spending time on it, enjoying themselves. That takes time and it takes work. And it also requires community management. Somebody's got to be there to answer questions or commiserate with people. You have to also make sure that people aren't going to abuse one another. They're not going to be mean. Or if they are, that you set boundaries and you say, look, that's not acceptable here. You don't want to create a toxic community by just not paying attention to it. You've got to invest in your community. So the crowdsourcing strategy guide. Again, this is more of a building a study that takes advantage of these things, that allows people to come in and create a groundswell of participation for you or with you. So the first question is, who's going to initiate the kinds of people who are going to be interested in your crowdsource study? Who's going to come in the door? Who's initially participating? Who's going to spend the most time? And then who's going to come back and bring all their friends? Who's this person who's going to say, oh, this is really cool. Let me bookmark it. I'm going to play this tonight. Or I'm going to do this tonight. And then they get there and they're going to spend an hour. They're going to be, this is so cool. And then they're going to get off and they're like, wait a second. I need to tell X, Y, and Z about this study. We're going to do this together. We're going to do this again on Thursday night. Who's that kind of person? That's going to be your ideal person to try and recruit and reach out to and get them involved. Next question, where can you find those kinds of people? Now, the first question is going to be, what kind of platform are you using? Is it a mobile app? Is it in the browser, the desktop? Because it's really going to affect the kinds of people who are going to invite their friends and how they invite their friends. What kind of platforms are they on where they're looking to do this kind of thing? what I find is that people who are on Twitter are looking to have live conversations with people about the topics of the day. And that's typically not what we're doing with volunteer science. We're not doing some of-the-moment surveys. We're doing, or studies. We're doing some core science, which I think, in our experience, has been more conducive on Facebook. Where people are wanting to spend longer periods of time learning about themselves, learning about the people around them. So we get a lot more bounce from Facebook than Twitter. And lastly, how would they recruit others? Are they going to send individual text messages to their friends to recruit them? Because if they are, then you need to figure out how to enable them to send text messages using your platform, and getting people to get to your platform from text messages. If they're going to do it on Twitter, write some nice tweets for them. Create a website that is going to show up really well as a Twitter snippet. And lastly, why would they participate? What are you going to put on Twitter, on your platform? How are you going to build the incentives of the system so that you realize their motivation? So the question is, what do they want from you? Do they want to see them getting better? Do they want to see how much data they've provided? Do they want to see how many friends they recruited? What do they want to engage with the long term? How will this actually be realized on the system? Is there like a leaderboard like we have on volunteer science? Is it a star system? Is it a ranking system? From novice to expert. And what do you have to give them? Certainly, always thank your participants, especially crowdsourcing participants who are not getting paid necessarily, or any kind of other kind of rewards. You want to acknowledge them. You certainly want to acknowledge them. But you always have to give them something. It's no free lunch. All right, so that's crowdsourcing. Social media, very related to crowdsourcing, but also very different. So social media recruitment is certainly the mode where you most see people shouting into the void. And the idea is, the idea is good. Social media reaches most anyone anywhere. Not every platform goes everywhere, but most everyone has some form of social media or engages in one form of social media or another. So the tactics here, social media posts, they are sort of shouting into the void, but they don't have to be. We're going to talk about how to make effective posts. Collaborating with moderators and collaborating with influencers, people who are already sort of masters of the social media domain or who have large followings that you can tap into. One-on-one outreach. So social media is typically thought of as like a one-to-many platform, but not every platform is like that. Some platforms are small groupish, and you can think about how to tap into those, like WhatsApp or Messenger. And lastly, you can engage in these ongoing discussions. So discussion threads, communities, groups, and trending topics. You get into these conversations where lots of people are already talking. You use that as a platform for talking about your study and I'm talking about your expertise. Lastly, don't forget some of the old school social media. So it's like discussion boards or things, blogs. They still exist. And that's where a lot of particularly technical communities can organize around. Even Craigslist as another example. Craigslist has a volunteers section that's where you can recruit volunteers for studies. A big warning here, as a researcher looking for people to take a study, you are generally engaging in spam. Spam is a self-serving type of communication where you want people to take your study. You really aren't giving anything back in terms of the social media post. Social media strategy. So what you want to do is you want to figure out how you give something back through social media, and a part of that can be, again, if you're engaging in these ongoing discussions, that you're not just coming into some trending topic and just saying, hey, hashtag, whatever, BTS, hashtag BTS, take the study, right? That's spam. What you want to talk about is hashtag BTS. Here's the science of acoustics. If you want to learn more, take this study. Something like that. You want to be able to contribute something to the conversation while also advertising for the study. All right, pros and cons. Before we get into the nuts and bolts, pro is easy and cheap. This is probably the most con of the pros. It's easy and cheap to publish. I can go to Twitter now and in 10 seconds have a tweet up for one of my studies. So it's really easy for you to get the message out there. And it's also possible for you to go viral. Like the right tweet with the right people can reach thousands and thousands or tens of thousands of people. Uh, if we were to partner with, um, Kim Kardashian, to retweet one of our tweets, we would quickly get thousands and thousands and thousands of participants for a study. So that's sort of the upside of social media posting. And the downside is you get little control over who responds. If we're posting on Twitter, for example, you have no idea who's going to respond. Anybody in the world, maybe some bots will respond. So again, you want to make sure you're filtering on the back end. Make sure that you are asking people for, that they fit the demographic filters that you have. It's hard to get right. Easy to do it poorly. So you can tweet until you are arthritic in your fingers, and you're not going to get any response. And again, because it's so easy and cheap to publish, you can just keep doing it and just spin your wheels. So this is how you try not to spin your wheels. So if you're thinking about who's going to be interested in your research, you're going to supposed to say, what are their interests? What are the topics that they follow, the communities that they're engaging in, who do they interact with, do the big influencers in this topic, and most importantly, where do they socialize or how do they socialize? So if these are people that you can reach on Twitter, you're thinking about text, but if they're on Instagram, you got to be ready to create photos for your recruitment message. If it's a WhatsApp, you have to think about one-on-one messaging, small scale, personal asks, personal conversation, recruitment strategies. Secondly, where can you find them? So you've already figured out, who you want to reach and what platform that you want to reach them. What the medium is going to be, texting or phoning or messaging. Now you want to figure out where to find them on the platform. So what hashtags are they using? What accounts do they follow? And what topics are they paying attention to? These are ways for you to engage in the conversation, to just sort of put your content into the conversation that's being had on these platforms. And lastly, why would they participate? So what's the fit between the sort of interests that they are engaging in online, this conversation that they're having, and the study itself? How does this conversation, how does their conversation fit into your study, and how does your study fit into their conversation? What are you going to give them for participation? And this is something that's more difficult to do on social media, where you don't have long-term social connections, but you can give them something, particularly if it's like you give them, say you're recruiting on Twitter, you give them a special tweet that's like, save $5 for science, which is what we do for volunteer science. But you give them something that is good for the platform where you find them. All right, second to last one, subject pools. Switching gears a bit. When we're thinking about online subject pools, we're thinking about three very different kinds of subject pools. Do they work in the same way? They're the same sort of concept. And that is, these platforms have these big lists of people who are ready to take scientific studies or studies of any sort. And what you're going to do is you're just going to be one of many studies that are being advertised. So the first type is crowdworking pools like Mechanical Turk and Prolific. These are, I think, the two most common in the social sciences. And what makes crowdworking special or specific is that you're paying an individual to participate in your study. So you're saying, I'm going to give you $5 to take this survey. And you pay them $5 when they finish. And then Mechanical Turk or Prolific will charge a premium on top of that. So I think Mechanical Turk is between 20 and 40%, depending on how you do the recruitment. So you pay $1 for a subject, and Mechanical Turk is going to take 20 cents or 40 cents. I don't know I forgot what Prolific's premium is. Now, the reason you use crowd workers is that it's relatively cheap. And the reason these Turkers and workers in Prolific are cheap compared to existing subject pools is that if it's a 5-minute survey, they're all going to spend 5 minutes on it. They're not coming into the lab. You're not having to like fill out all these forms to actually send them money. All of that stuff is happening automatically. It literally only takes them 5 minutes to do the study, as opposed to the whole 30-minute process of running it in the lab. You can control the pay. So if it's $5 for the survey, they get $5. This is very different from the sample sellers, where you have no idea whether anybody's going to get paid or whether they're getting paid at all. And lastly, really importantly, you can issue bonuses. So if you're doing economic research and you want to pay people that extra buck for winning the game, you can do that on Mechanical Turk and Prolific. You can't do that on sample sellers, and generally, you can do it at the volunteer science panel, but it's not as easy. So these bonus payments are really important a really important feature for crowd work. Now, the reason you wouldn't want to use crowd workers is that many do participate in bad faith, so they'll rush through, or they'll build bots to try to finish studies to try and make as much money as they can. The other side too is that many people charge a lot or pay a lot less than we do. So we pay everybody $15 an hour equivalent. So if we think it's an hour-long study, we pay you $15. If it's a third of an hour, which is 20 minutes, if it's 20 minutes, we'll pay you $5. A lot of people don't pay that much. But that means that people have to try to rush to survive economically. So you want to make sure that you have in place some checks to make sure that you're not getting bots, that people are paying attention, that they're not rushing, that they've read the instructions. In my experience, 95% of people are participating in good faith. It's just those 5% of people that you have to find a way to check for. Lastly, these pools can be limited. There's limited data on some background demographic characteristics of the participants. Prolific is actually pretty good in terms of the extent of demographic data, but it's not nearly as big as Lucid or Pure Spectrum or YouGov. And they also tend to be smaller pools. The Lucid and Pure Spectrum are something like 1 million people. Sample sellers. So these Lucid, Pure Spectrum, YouGov, GFK, formerly Knowledge Networks. These are organizations where they have big subject pools for doing scientific studies, typically surveys. The way it works is that you pay the seller. So you pay Lucid, you pay Pure Spectrum, you pay YouGov for a participant. And you have no idea whether that participant is paid or unpaid. Some panels are people who just like take marketing surveys, and they get little credits that they can turn in for like mugs or T-shirts or whatever. And some of them actually are paid pools. But the thing is, you don't know. So the reason that you will use sample sellers is that, one, you can sample on background demographic characteristics. As I mentioned, they will actually keep these demographic characteristics on people, or they'll require people to fill out the demographic characteristic survey before starting your study. So you can sample the demographics a lot more effectively. It's typically a large pool. Again, I think Lucid or Pure Spectrum is something like 20 million people, or they say they do. And I believe it, given our experiences, typically large pools. And sometimes they can be very cheap. So these generally are cheaper if you have very few demographic restrictions. If you want to recruit anyone in the United States, it's probably like $1 per completion. Whereas if you want to recruit a really narrow sample, it could be $20 or $100 per person. Now, the reason you wouldn't want to do these sample sellers is that there's an unknown selection process. You have no idea where these people are coming from, why they're participating, where they're participating from, what context they're participating with. You don't know if they're being compensated, what their reward structure is, and your participant quality can vary as a result. You have no idea. Again, it's a black box. On the other hand, the last one here, we'll talk about the volunteer science panel, which actually can be similar to any university panel of participants. But the idea here is, at least for volunteer science, is including the account. So we'll send an email every month on your behalf if you have, I think it's the advanced account or a lab account with us. But every email gives you quick and cheap access to our pool, which is right now is 20,000 volunteers. So it's like having a small undergraduate university population at your disposal, and you typically get high quality participants. So these people are volunteering. They signed up for our panel because they want to volunteer for scientific research. So they're high quality. This is what they want to do. The downside is you don't have a lot of sample control. So we don't have a ton of demographics on people. So it's really just sending out a blast. And sort of related to that, it's not good for narrow samples. If you wanted 1,000 accountants, we're not good. You're not going to find 1,000 accountants in the volunteer science sample. Just for those of you who are interested, at least as of right now, about 25% of our sample is from the United States, 20% from India, and 8% from Nigeria, India, Israel, and Australia, and then there's sort of a long tail of countries. I think 75% are native or expert English speakers. So it's a decent pool. All right. Online pool pros and cons. So this is definitely the easiest way to get subjects if you have money. You know, if you pay again, if you pay $5 to a Tooker, they're going to pick your study and it's going to be done in a day. So something like Mechanical Turk, you can do 1,000 subjects in a day if you have the cash for it. They just have people there to work. You can also get representative samples, again, because things like Mechanical Turk and Pure Spectrum, they keep demographic characteristics. You can do quota sampling and get a sample that's representative on the dimensions that you can sample from. The downside is it costs money. If you don't have money, you can't do it, except for volunteer science. Technically, if you have your account, there's no extra money for it. But there's also the caveat emptor on participants, especially for crowd workers and sample sellers. You have no idea who's coming in that door, and many people are rushing through to earn their money. All right, so quick strategy worksheet for these subject pools. This is just trying to figure out which pool should you be using and how do you frame your study within that pool. So, what do people want? Do they want to earn money? Do they just doing surveys and getting swag for it, or are they volunteering for science? Again, this is how you pick the pool, but it also impacts why they would participate. Again, where can you find that matches the motivation, the interests? So paid pools for people who want to earn money, sample sellers for people who just want to do surveys, the volunteer science panel for people who just want to volunteer for science. The motivation, again, the more money you pay, the more motivated people are going to be, which actually can be good. You don't want to pay too little because people will certainly rush for that. On the volunteer science side, you want to articulate how people are helping science and what the payoff is for the for the body of scientific knowledge. And you can even add in more to that if you wanted to be specific, giving people specific rewards. Last thing I want to mention is online advertising. Now, online advertising, if you have money, is typically the best way to go. I'll say it's usually not a bad way to go. There's very little downside to online ads. The issue here is that it is sort of a technical skill that you have to figure out. And this fall, we're going to do a workshop on doing online ads that'll try to give you more of that technical skill. But this will be a good introduction to that. So if you find this interesting and you want to learn more about online ads, look for our training this fall. Generally, online ads start by picking your platform dependent. So you want to use like Facebook ads, Google ads, Twitter ads, Reddit ads, or what have you. The question here, of course, is where are your participants and which platform can you actually reach them through? So your participants are probably all on Facebook because everybody's on Facebook. But if you want to get people who are reading the news when they're reading the news, then you probably want to do Google AdWords and focus on news websites. Second, find your audience on that platform. I'll talk a little bit more about this, but every platform has a way for you to find your interest groups or audiences. And you'll just have to figure out how to specify those audiences on those platforms. Then you want to create ads that appeal to those audiences. This will be images, content. Everybody's seen ads. You want to create 3 or 4, maybe 5 ads for every ad campaign. Most importantly, the most important piece of advice I have here is number 4. Run small tests with multiple ads first. And what this does is 2 things. One, you're going to run 5, 10, maybe $20 a day over 2 or 3, maybe 4 days. And what this does is it tells you how much your ads are going to cost if you try to scale. So you'll get a sense. I spent $100. Did I get 100 people? That's $100 per person. Did I spend $100 and get 1,000 people? That's 10 cents a person. Did I spend $100 and get 1 person? It's going to be $100 a person. So it gives you a sense of what the budget's going to be for actually trying to recruit the entire sample. The other thing that it does is it helps you identify the most cost-effective ads and audiences. And I'll go into what that means in a second. But generally, this little test will tell you, this particular ad with this particular audience is $5 a person, whereas this one is $2 per person, right? And so what you do for 7 or 5, when you scale up your ad spending, is you turn off the expensive ones and you run the cheaper ones. That's exactly what step 5 is, that scaling up. Now every system is different, but they all generally have the same kind of structure, which is this. This is from Facebook ads, but everything else is generally follows this. The language kind of changes sometimes. So the highest level here is campaign. This is where you just like kind of what counts as a victory for your ads. Right? Are you doing link clicks? How many times ads that optimize on people clicking on the advertisement versus ads that optimize on the actual thing that you want them to do on your website. And that requires actually putting a little code snippet on your website, which again we'll cover more in the fall. But the campaign is where you determine the outcome that you want to track. Within every campaign, you choose different ad sets. Each ad set has that interest tailoring that you're doing. So the demographics, the geographics, the interests, the substantive interests. And then with each ad set, you choose the ads. So you have an ad with one image and a headline and some details. A second ad with a different image, different headlines, different details. Don't waste your time A/B testing with like same image but different headline. Usually we don't have the budget for that kind of stuff. And you don't learn too much given the level of budget that we work with in academia. Unless you're working with tens of thousands of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars, and you want to run it for 6 months to a year, then you can start doing some A/B testing. But really, what you want to do is you just want to find, you want to do is broad search. You want to different image, different headline, all have different pitches. And you just want to figure out in general, am I going to pitch, on the top right, am I pitch on the bottom left, kind of thing. You don't want to be A/B testing at this point. Pros and cons. So certainly the pros, you can recruit. This is where you can recruit anyone anywhere. Again, 3 billion people on Facebook every month means that you can effectively recruit half of the entire population of the world in any given month. You can also recruit an endless supply of subjects. If you are recruiting Americans, there are 300 million of us and probably 150 million or so on Facebook, which is probably many more than you'll ever need as a researcher. You'll never reach all of them, but for research purposes, it's practically endless. And lastly, you can turn subjects off and on when you need them. So once you get ads working, you can stop spending money and subjects will stop showing up. Start spending money again, subjects will come back in again. The more money you spend, the more subjects you get. Now, that's generally true unless you're spending tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars, then you might start seeing some ad exhaustion. Where a person's just going to stop responding to your ad after seeing it a couple of times, or you've reached all of the people who are going to show up that month, for example. But generally, you don't have to worry about any of that stuff. It's very much like a car when you're doing academic ads. More gas, more people. No gas, no people. Cons, it costs money. And you won't know how much until you'll run those small little ads. So you have to go pretty far down the road of actually doing the strategizing, creating the ads, and getting set up before you know whether it's going to work or not. But the good thing is that you get some early testing before you spend a ton of money. Please do not just spend $5,000 on an ad campaign. If you want to do that, just give me $5,000. This is just as good a use of your time. Now, these aren't guaranteed to work. Sometimes it's going to cost you $100 to recruit, $100 per person to recruit somebody, and you're not going to have that budget. So you can get all the way to that step 4 where you're doing a small test and realize that it's not worth it. But at least you've saved your budget. And every platform is different, so there's an overhead cost to learning Facebook ads versus Google ads. It's like programming. Every language sort of works the same, but they've got different syntaxes, different ways of doing the same kinds of things. And so you sort of get good at doing online ads, but every platform has its own unique characteristics. They're all more expensive than Facebook, in my experience. So Facebook is always a good place to start, just in terms of cost and yield. But again, if the people that you want to recruit are not on Facebook, or you need to recruit them elsewhere, go ahead and do that. Again, here's our strategy worksheet. Do you want to think about the demographic characteristics? Especially once you figure out the platform that you're on, figuring out what demographic characteristics are represented on that platform is really important. Same thing with the interests, so the accounts that they follow, the hashtags that they use, the topics that they're paying attention to. Every platform represents them a little bit differently. So once you pick a platform, you'll have a better sense of whether you need to know hashtags versus just general interest topics. Where can you find them? This is a platform question. Do you need to reach them on Facebook, or do you need to reach them on Twitter? A part of this is figuring out what platform are they using to fulfill the desire that you're satisfying. So if you're trying to do the crowdsourcing thing and you want people to really build an identity around your scientific study, Reddit may actually be a good one, because Reddit is where people organize around identities, the subreddits that they're on, and they spend a lot of time in those communities. If you have a study that's a part of the moment, that is a part of the current conversation, Twitter is actually probably a better place, because that's where people go to have conversations about what's happening in the moment. Lastly, why would they participate? This has to go with creating the ads. What are the 5 to 10 words? Because the ads are very quick, very short. 5 to 10 words that are going to pique somebody's interest. What image is going to grab their attention? Don't put words in your image. Just keep it an image and give 5 to 10 words. So what you're going to do is they're going to click on the ad, and then they're going to land on some standard page like we have on Volunteer Science. This is why we do it the way we do on Volunteer Science. So they click on the ad, and they land on the actual summary of the study, where they've decided that this is something they think is interesting, and now they're going to learn more. And so you have to give them more. But the ad, 5 to 10 words that says, hey, yeah, I want to learn more. So you got to figure out what images are going to grab that attention, make them want to learn more, and a call to action. Again, usually we use learn more, but sometimes you could say get started, or play a game. I think this is one, something like that. So you want to figure out what the call to action is. All right, so last, most important, what strategy is right for you? So I have this decision tree based on the money that you have, whether your audience is broad or narrow, how many subjects you need, what strategy generally is going to be the best. These are not bright lines. Generally, whether you have money or you don't have money. If you don't have a lot of money, the answer is no. If you have lots of money, you get funding, yes. Use the money that you have. Is your audience broad or narrow? Is it the entire population of the United States? Or are there only 2,000 people in the entire country who can take your study? Again, there's there's not really a binary choice. Just give a sense of whether it's a lot of people or a few people who qualify. And lastly, how many subjects do you need? Lots or a few? Again, this could be subjective, and it sort of depends on the recruitment strategy that you do. But generally, when you say a few, we're talking about less than 100 or a couple hundred. Lots, we're thinking about thousands of people, or at least the upper hundreds maybe. So if you've got money, you have a broad audience, but you only need a few people, Volunteer Science is a good place to go. If you have no money, broad audience, but only need a few people, social media is a place to go. Okay, that's it. Let me wrap up here. The lesson here is don't shout out into the void. Don't just create a flyer, don't create some tweets and just send them out. Don't just write some email and send them out. Take 30 minutes, fill out that form, and create a strategy. And pick the method that matches your strategy. Figure out what what your resources are, what your sampling frame is. Figure out what that strategy is, and then fill out that spreadsheet, that little table. All right, thank you. This is a reminder, we have some upcoming workshops this summer. The cognitive task with JS Psych, multi-person studies, build your own study pool. We're going to have more this fall. If you are interested in specific frameworks this fall, you can vote on some of the ideas that we have for the fall. You can also add your own. If you go to www.allarideas.org/vs-trainings, you can go in and vote or add an idea. If you need help or want to see something new that we haven't covered, please give me an email at jason_radford@volunteerscience.com. Thank you so much.